Right. Welcome, C3 parents. I'm your host, Karien Pitout, and I'm super excited today. Today, Gaopalelwe is joining me in this conversation about feminism and raising boys. Now, Gao is the mommy blogger of Feminist Mommy, sorry for that one. Feminist Mommy. She's a journalist, she's an activist, she's actually one of the feminists that I personally follow and listen to and take my cues from when it comes to addressing the issues within society. And I'm super excited. We're both raising boys, which means our set of rules that we actually have to work with when we raise our boys looks a bit different because of the way that we actually face patriarchy and need to start working at breaking down that system. Welcome, Gao. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Karien. I'm also very excited. I've been looking forward to it.
Fantastic. All right, so let's dive right into this conversation and let's kick started with the day that you found out you were pregnant with a boy. You have been an activist and a feminist for most of your life. How did your heart feel when you realized, okay, you're expecting a boy and you understand that there's certain expectations of boys in society?
To be honest with you, I was very excited because of matters unrelated to my feminism. So I had a little brother who passed away at the age of 5. So when I found out I'm having a boy, it was all based on that. It had nothing to do with my feminism. That only came later when I was faced with like a lot of issues. But it was a family thing, so I felt like the universe was granting me another opportunity to have a little boy, and I was very excited by that. So it was really unrelated to my feminism at that stage, but it soon came through.
I remember when we found out that our children are boys, there was a part of me that was kind of sad, but also kind of relieved, because it is just easier for boys to move through life in general. So I found I was a bit relieved, and I didn't really connect it later. Later, I realized that relief was connected to my understanding of feminism and all of that. But for me, I was relieved. Like I'm expecting boys, and I'm a boy mom. It's a big struggle for me to put on makeup and dolly myself up. I'm just not like that. All right. So when we look at addressing the issues that patriarchy actually challenges us with, things that we have to actually actively teach our boys, like boys are allowed to cry, hurting someone is not a sign of love, those kind of conversations. When did you first start having those conversations with your kids?
So my youngest is 9 months, so the only conversations we are having is that doo-doo.
Baby language.
And my oldest is 9. Did I say 9? Oh my gosh, I'm making him so big. He turned 6 in May. He turned 6 in May. He's quite young. I think my journey with my son, before any conversation started, was I was a single mom for a period of my life. And I just treated him as a child. I never thought of him, I knew he was a boy, but it was never a gender thing. And that's where it began. That's where I began kind of investigating my own internalized patriarchy, because we also have it, right? Before outwardly having the conversations with him. So for an example, but when my son was born, my niece was 3 months older, so they are the same age. So there was this thing of genderizing them. So for instance, when they'd be playing, my niece would hurt my son, and the other family members would say, "Don't hurt a boy, he'll hit you." And that's when I started to have to confront whether I agree with their thoughts, and whether that's a correct thing to think. And things would be said like, my niece mustn't play rough. Only my son was. But the funny thing was, my niece was more active than my son. She was braver than my son. So my niece would climb a tree. My son wouldn't. And there seemed to be a lot of comments about, no, but why is he so weak or sissy like, or, you know, and my niece was very, in terms of milestones, she picked up way faster than my son. So all of those attitudes, before I even addressed them, I had to sit down and think, do you believe this? How you know, and I realized I grew up with this mindset myself, and I need to deconstruct it first before I can even tell anybody else that they shouldn't do that or say that. And it was important for me to correct adults in front of the kids so that the kids can know that that narrative is being challenged by someone else, so that when they grow up and remember, oh, when me and my cousin were playing and he hit me and somebody said boys shouldn't hit, there's an aunt who said no, that's not correct, boys don't hit, boys aren't violent, you know. So that's where the journey started, because by then they were 3 years old or 2 years, they couldn't really grasp conversation.
Yes.
But it was important for me to change the narratives around them, because that's where you start shaping their mindset, because I don't think that children are born with that framework. I feel like they are socialized, and the example I'm making is they essentially what was socializing them into that. And I made it an effort to make sure that I challenge that right in front of them, and I challenge the adult and have the conversation with the adult right there. They're open to it, so that the children can hear it or see it, and they're not thinking this is normal. So that's where it basically started.
Oh, I actually fully agree with you. And one of the important things that you hit on, and it's one of the things that I try to, when I coach parents, focus on, is you parent the parent first. You first look at, why are you the kind of parent that you are? You ask those questions and you challenge that. And that's the only way that you can actually break cycles of patriarchy, cycles of abuse, cycles of hurt and pain, is parenting the parent first. Being okay with the feeling of loss of love when you upset the family members or when you upset people
Yes,
around you, when you speak up. And that is one of the biggest challenges, I believe, in raising consciously aware kids. And that is, at the end of the day, the aim, by challenging, having these conversations and saying, oh, well, but I'm sorry, I don't agree with you, that it can be either or, it doesn't matter. Um,
yes.
it's I've got my boys are also the gentle. Okay, the oldest is extremely gentle and the youngest is the wild child. So good luck until it's a second child thing. So good luck, may the odds be ever in your favor. When Ringo starts really get like putting his whole personality into effect. But it's interesting to see that when you see postings on Facebook and on social media, when it's like, when you're a boy mom, you know, they genderize the type of parenting you have to do. So it's not just genderizing kids and forcing them to fit into a specific mold, but also almost forcing us as parents into a mold of how we have to parent our kids according to the child's gender. You're a boy mom or you're a girl
Exactly.
mom.
And what I wanted to point out to you when you're saying that is, when you want to raise kids that are conscious of patriarchy and deviate towards that, it's important that your parenting is exemplary. You need to model exemplary English.
Yes.
You need to model that parenting, because look, the reality is we live in a society where almost everyone you meet in the street is socialized in a patriarchal way. So you can't be saying something to your child but doing the opposite, while the whole world is also doing exactly what you are doing, and expecting them to know differently. It's impossible. They need frameworks and examples of how that is modeled. So the people you bring to your house, it's important as a parent to make sure that they model that. Not that I'm saying you need to kick out all your patriarchal uncles. It's an
Can you
opportunity
imagine?
to challenge them. It's an opportunity to challenge them, but I associate myself with parents that have the same fundamental beliefs, so that my children can have that example of what I want them to be. So that when they're older, they're not like, yeah, you say I need to live this way, but where's the example of that? Where do you see it? Because everywhere I go, school, wherever, this is the life. So what are you saying, mom? So modeling is very important. I'll make it a keyword, modeling it.
Yes, absolutely. So I always have this saying, and I say it in my courses often to the parents, is, if your child starts treating you like an ale, go look in the mirror, because they're mirroring what you're doing. So go check on how you're talking, how you're behaving. And it's good for our kids to see us challenge people in a position of authority when they overstep the boundaries, because how else are they going to learn how to step into the world and challenge those things, whether it is really like fighting about it or actually doing it in a respectful way, because there's space for respectful challenging, but there's also space for enough is enough. It's not an either or, it is a both have a space within breaking down these mindsets, and how harmful some of these mindsets is to for boys. If we go and look at adult men in society, and I'm sorry to all my male followers, I'm probably like really really kicking you right now, but
I keep missing you.
It is hurtful to see how much pain you carry, or our male adults carry, because they're not allowed to, they have been trained that they are not allowed to do certain things. And that is one of the harms that patriarchy does to both women and men, is our identities actually from a very young age get stripped away, because there's this little box that you have to fit into, and it robs every person from the fullness of their whole authentic self.
I agree with you.
So
I agree.
it's and so we look at hurt adults, and we keep on repeating that cycle if we don't start breaking it down. And our kids need to see the example of us breaking it down and challenging that. And that is one of the reasons I absolutely love what you do and how you approach things. You know exactly when you are going into a conversation and when you are respectful, and when is the time to basically drop the F-bomb and say, guys, I'm out. And you've got that classic ability of doing that, and therefore I'm learning from you. So thank you for the
Oh,
example.
thank you so much.
So
Thank you
that
so
is
much. I really appreciate it.
so
Yeah.
what is, if besides modeling, what is one of the other things that you can, if another mom wants to, or dad wants to start breaking down the system and raising their kids, besides modeling, what else would you say, go for it, like these are things that you can look at?
Yeah. I think for me, it's also open and honest conversations with your children. So as I said to you before, I was a single mom for a period of time when his dad was not around. And that was the hardest time of my life. I was very depressed. I had to reckon with, oh my gosh, I'm really having to do this on my own. So I couldn't hide my emotions from my child, and we are taught to do that. And that's when the opening and honest conversations began. And we started talking a lot about pain and feeling and crying, because he was just confused. Why is mommy crying? You're mommy. Why are you crying? And I couldn't hide it from him anymore. And I had to start having conversations with him about how valid pain is, how valid crying is. And those kind of conversations with children are important. So when children cry, we have a tendency of trying to stop them, not because we want them not to cry, but because we just want to end it because we care about them, right? That's the first one. But the second one, there's this thing of boys don't cry. It's a lot in my culture. I'm not sure about yours, but in my culture, there's a lot of reference to men must not cry, boys, and it starts early, so they train them. Don't cry, you're a boy.
That is, I think,
So I had to.
human. That is a human thing, because in the Afrikaans white
Yeah.
culture, it was at the names a boy gets called if he dares cry or gets upset or shows emotions. It's harmful, and then it actually the commentary goes on to the homophobia side, the kind of comments that the people use when a boy expresses his feelings.
Yeah. So whenever he would cry, even when there was a tantrum, I would tell him that I can't give you this, but I'm going to sit here with you and let you cry and support you through you wanting that but can't have it. I'm not giving it to you because I care about you and I'm trying to protect you because I'm your mother, but let's sit down and cry. So crying, you need to allow your children to cry. You need to hug them through it. You need to support them through it. even when the crying is unreasonable. Because adults then grow up and refuse to cry even when it's unreasonable, because they're not safe enough to do it. They were never taught that it's okay, even when it's unreasonable, because once they know it's unreasonable, and you support them through it. He even cries quickly and he's like, okay, I'm fine now. Because
They
somebody was there.
process
So
the
allowing
emotions.
emotions,
Yeah, they process the
you know,
emotions
yeah. So
so much
it's an
faster.
emotion thing. Yes, that's the one. And the other one is treat your children as children. Yes, my son is a boy. I recognize that biologically he's a boy, and he will wear different nappies from a baby girl. He will wear different underwear from a baby girl, you know, or he'll dress a certain way because society's expectations need him to dress a certain way. And I'll address that later. But you need to treat them as children because they don't even have the framework of gender a lot of the times. Let them grow into their gender if that's what's going to happen. Let it be natural. Don't force it into them to say, you're a boy. I always used to correct people who would come see us and visit us and call him the man of the house. And I was like, no, I'm the woman of the house. This is the child of the house. Don't put it in his head that he's the man of the house. And there are actually mothers who do it themselves, who say, there's no man, you're going to be the man. And they start training their little boys to start being tough and being protective. That's a lot of baggage for a child, guys. Children need to play. They need to learn to be. So that's the second one. Don't treat them as a gender. Don't box them into a gender. Treat them as a child. Treat them equally. So I always make sure when my son is with my nieces, they're all the same. There's no, oh, you're a boy, you go first. Oh, you're a girl. No, no, no. They're all treated the same equally, and they're all given the same chores and the same things to do, because that's what it should be. I'll think of others, but that's what I can think of for now. Things will come up as we go. But that's what's been so important for me. Look, I don't always get it right, and people need to understand that I make mistakes because I'm human. But I always try to look within and assess my decisions and my actions with regards to my kids, because I was raised in a very abusive home. So I'm very alert with triggers. So I need to always be careful of what I do and what I say.
Parenting yourself is a continuous process. It's not like I did it today, so I'm okay for the rest of my life. It is, and as they grow older, different triggers gets fired. There's for instance, and it's a silly example, but when we see someone else hurt someone in a way that we were hurt as a child, immediately there's an incenseness, there's a anger that pushes up, and we want to protect the person being harmed or being hurt, but we only become aware of that hurt happening, or that we still carry that baggage when we actually see it play out in front of us. So there's a lot of triggers and a lot of hurt that we carry that we're not aware of until someone does something that gives us that moment of, oh my word, this is how I feel about it. The other thing that for us as a family is, and it's if we bring race into the feminist conversation, which we can't exclude out of the conversation in any way, is that I need to, for instance, besides raising my sons regarding consent, which is extremely important, because there's this whole within patriarchy, almost like men don't really need to ask consent. Just the fact that they're born with a penis, they already have the yes of the world. But added to that, my kids are white, which means they've got additional privilege to that. So part of my feminist raising them is teaching them that they are allowed to take up space, which every person is allowed to, but they need to pull back so that their privilege and their whiteness does not overshadow, and the fact that they identify as male don't overshadow the other people in the room. Whereas for you, raising a black boy, it looks different. Do you mind expanding on what it would look differently than for me?
So for me, there's a lot of validation that comes into raising a black boy, and there's a lot of modeling and showing him that he can be as confident as he wants to, no matter what space he is in. We've also had a little bit of conversations about race because he's so young. It's so hard to go too deep into it. But we do have the conversations because there's been times where he's confused about whether a person is white at the school or Indian. But the one thing that he's never asked is why we are different yet. It hasn't come yet. Why we all look different. I haven't had to explain that yet. But he's asked me certain questions about certain things, and I've been very honest with him about what apartheid is, and he'll respond with, "That is so sad," and it makes me so emotional when he says it, because the fact that he's so in tune with the emotion and he can feel that this is unfair is so important for me. So when I tell him something, because there'll be holidays like certain holidays like June 16 and so on. When he asks me why are we home, why are we not going to school, I'll explain to him this is what happened. If you want us to watch a show, because there's not much kiddies show about it though, I wish they were, but I'll try my best to try and explain. The only challenge I have is when he goes back to school or preschool, and those are challenged. I've had a lot of fights with schools in the past because of my views and how I hold things. Yeah. But I think the most important thing for us as Black people when we are raising our kids is teaching them not to self-hate, because it's way more important than teaching them that racism is a thing. It's there, but self-hate is one of the things that's really painful for me as a Black person, and it has been quite a difficult journey for me to unlearn to unlearn the belief that as a Black person, I don't have value, I'm not important, I'm as good as a servant, because we grow up, we are socialized in that way as well, even in our own homes, because that was one of the biggest projects of apartheid, right? To make us believe that we are not worthy. So for me, it's also this challenging this whole idea that a lot of positive parenting is white people parenting. I've had to break that a lot, because there's this cultural belief. I say cultural because it's culture is customs. People make something a culture, right? I say cultural in that context because there's this belief that raising your kids to have an opinion, to be confident, to choose for themselves. Like if I go to a McDonald's with my son, yeah, it's unhealthy, but we do go. um, and I tell him, we will wait until you pick what you want. That is seen as, oh, you're such a white kind of parent. And I've always felt like, but why should Black children and Black parents not have this kind of a relationship? Why shouldn't my child be assertive? Why shouldn't I give him an opportunity to take up space, to have an opinion, you know? And those are the kind of things that for me, I feel like white supremacist regimes did that to us. So I try by all means to make sure that I move away from that and remember that validation, confidence, all of those things are important even for a Black child. Their opinion matters. You know, it's not a matter of this is a white parenting way or whatever. So yeah, it's very challenging to be a Black parent and raising your child in that way, because you're accused of trying to mimic white people, and it's like, no.
You're trying to break down so many barriers and boundaries. As we are aware, when we look at in feminist circles, often the biggest gatekeepers of the patriarchy is women. We tend to tell women how to behave and stop them from pushing through. And from what I understand from the bits of Steve Biko and that internalized racism, a lot of times when we deal with even in our different parenting styles, that a lot of times that we become the gatekeepers of something that is hurtful and harmful, but not gatekeepers in the sense of, oh, but you calling the wrongs out, but on the opposite side of actually trying to push people back into the harmful and the hurtful. And it's in my culture and tradition. It's also you know, a child should be quiet and seen, you know, not heard. So there's quite a lot of similarities of that background that comes through. But yes, we as white kids are allowed that at a certain age you have a seat at the table, and you can, you know, you can talk back and you can give your opinions, as long as it's done. And that's where respectfulness politics actually comes in. You have to do it in a certain way, otherwise you're not allowed to say what you want to say. I know one of the things that I often do with my children, and I recently did a why your kids should back chat like workshop, and is to to understand that having those conversations and actually understanding the brain function of kids, that backchatting and all of that breaks down this idea that there is superiority, whether it is male or versus female, whether it's white versus black, whether it's versus adult versus child. That power dynamics is always present in every single conversation that we have. And raising boys to be acutely aware of that power dynamics, understanding that when they're stepping out in the world, there's power dynamics when they deal with a girl, the way that people talk. I remember when I was pregnant with my oldest the first time, people said, oh, you're so fortunate having a boy, because when you have a girl, you have the whole neighborhood's penises to worry about, but when you have a boy, you only have one penis to worry about. And I just,
God.
yes, and I just looked at them and I was like, it just didn't compute.
That is so cringy. That is so cringy. I can't believe people say that with confidence. Like, oh my God, that's a lot. I can't.
They do.
I was on the other side told I must be happy that I'm having a boy, because boys they continue the family name and stuff like that. That whole belief that they continue the family name, and yeah, I've worked hard, and I was like, this is ridiculous. So before you're even born, a life is already decided for you. Already there's a trajectory for you. It's a whole lot.
And I think the other comment that I heard or was told to me is, remember, it's so much easier to raise boys because they raise themselves. And I think that is part of the problem within society, that there's a very hands-on approach to girls, in the sense like, we need to limit you. You're only allowed to wear X. You're only allowed to do Y. You're only allowed to do Z. There's a lot of limitations on girls. And with boys, it's a far more hands-off kind of approach. And then we wonder why we struggle with men that is unregulated, unable to deal with conflict, unable to deal with emotions, unable to deal with someone pushing back, because boys raise themselves. And in my personal opinion,
and it's very true.
That's one of the foundational roots for the GBV problem that we have in the world, is that hands-off approach.
Yeah.
Raising boys.
Because they also grow up to be very closed off, feeling like they don't owe anybody anything. They don't need anything from anybody. They raise themselves. So why should you tell them how to live their lives? And they become really crappy boyfriends and husbands, because you're like, but we need each other. Like, we have to need each other. Like, why can't you need me? And then they have this emotional unavailability that is very abusive, that is very cold, and that you don't need. So I also try very hard to ensure that I'm not emotionally unavailable. I don't teach him to be. One of the things that we didn't say that I wanted to point out as well was body positivity. We think it's only important for little girls. It's also very important for boys, because as what you're saying, a lot of boys get molested and touched inappropriately as young kids, and they keep that in because of you're raised not to be emotional and speak out and cry. And apparently boys are supposed to enjoy being molested, which is ridiculous. And that's what takes away the notion of consent from their minds. So I've had to teach my son, and it's ongoing, that his body is beautiful, that his body can be whatever he wants it to be, as long as he's not harming anybody else. He can be confident in his body. I also teach him that you need to ask that I have family members who are not okay with being seen naked, and I tell him that's their choice. Don't go into the room. He also has started that, I don't want anybody in the bathroom when I'm naked. And I said, that's okay, that's fine. But I had to interrogate why, and it turned out that he thought his body is laughable, that people will laugh at him if they see him naked. And I needed to know why. What is it about your naked body that makes it laughable? So those are kind of things that are also important for boys. Also teaching him that if anybody touches you, you need to speak, you need to say something. If anybody touches you, and I also teach him, what are your private parts meant for peeing and pooping. There's no other function for them at your age. So any other thing that you're asked to do that is not peeing or pooping, that's not part of the functions that your organ's supposed to be. So those type of teachings have been very important for me, because I worry, I'm scared, because boys also get molested and touched, and they keep it a secret, sometimes to the grave.
Yes. Now that I think that is one of the biggest fears. I think the moment you become a parent, that's one of your biggest fears, and I think every single adult you meet becomes suspect, which is probably not a healthy way to live life. Um, but we do we do have a sense of suspicion around a lot of adults, because it's so easy for pedophiles just to worm themselves into a thing. And if you go and look at the stats, most pedophiles, their victims aren't the random stranger they met on the street. It's a family member. So I'm actually far more alert around family members than I am around strangers, which is probably also not healthy, but that's how at this moment my proclivities go.
Yeah. No, I'm
While
with
you
you.
were talking, one of the things that actually popped out to me that I was thinking, that one of the things that we often have conversations with is when we talk about consent, we actually play this game like the no and stop game, due to the way that we use words. And when you use the word no, no can be used in a joke and in fun and in games, like no, don't throw water at me, and don't. So no is not a word that actually has the right amount of power to protect a child or to teach consent with.
Yeah.
At least that's my personal opinion regarding that. Where the word stop is so powerful. In our home, we play a tickle game, and we tickle each other until someone says stop, and then everybody goes like this, and we stop playing until everybody agrees, okay, are we ready to start again? And then if everybody says yes, we go on. If any person says I'm out, then we say, all right, you can sit out, and the rest who still wants to continue playing keeps on playing until someone says stop, and then we keep on playing this game, so that they actually learn that when someone says stop, it means stop. It doesn't mean
I
you'll
love
go
it.
easy into something. We stop at okay, most of the times we as adults, but I must say I'm a much more conscious driver and stickler to the rules of the road when the kids are in the car with me, because I don't want them to
No,
drive
I
my
love that game. I
um,
love it. I think I'm gonna start incorporating it, because I've just been stopping, but not as you've done it. But
mm.
I think it's important. I think I love it. I've learned something as well. I love
Awesome.
it.
So and that whole thing, and we have that rule that if someone says stop and someone does not listen to that person's stop, we actually as adults intervene and we remove the kids. Okay, remove the kids from each other and say, you heard your brother say stop. What is the rule? When someone says stop, you stop. So now you need to spend time with me until you're okay to respect your brother's boundaries. So we take it to that level, because I don't want to receive a phone call one day and someone saying, listen, yeah, your son did not listen when someone said stop.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
I've got a responsibility of teaching my son that, but I also have a
Definitely.
responsibility to teach my son to be the one that interferes when he hears someone say stop and that person does not stop, and how to
Mm.
interfere in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I love it. And I think we all have that responsibility. When you were talking, you just reminded me of the fact that one other things parents need to do is to ensure that when something happens, they don't put it aside or brush it off. You deal with it in the moment. You might be busy with something else, maybe, but make sure that when you have the time, you take it seriously. Because there's a lot of times that things happen to me and I felt I was not protected and it wasn't taken seriously and it took away my trust, and that happens a lot with children. So my son has tendencies of doing things even to adults and not wanting to stop, and I have to teach him that, okay, auntie, whoever does not feel like playing right now, you need to stop, you need to let her be and find something else to do, or I can play with you if you want. So you offer an alternative. So stopping something and taking it seriously, not like shouting and screaming and you need to stop that, no, but taking it seriously, going to their level and letting them know that no, you needed to stop this for this and this reasons. It also builds trust with other people around you, other kids around you, or the kid themselves learns that this is important. So yeah, it's one of the things that has happened a lot for us.
Yes, building that. All right. I think we're going to. Would you like to add anything? I'm going to give you a minute to add anything you would like to add.
I don't know. I don't know about your audience, but I also and how far they are in terms of these things. But I wanted to just add the fact that I say my kids are boys just because this is the framework I have now. But I'm open to them having one day saying, I'm actually not a boy, I'm a girl. So this gender thing is really close to my heart, and it's very important to ensure that I've said to him many times, I call you a boy, and I know society calls you a boy, but whenever you feel like you're not a boy, or you've always felt like you're not a boy and you want to say it, you can come to me, you can open up to me. So we need to be more conscious of the fact that gender is in here and not by the genitals. Yeah, and read up on it, find out about it. It may not be your kid, it might be the kid next door, the kid your child is friends with, but it's very important to be aware that there's other things that happen, and treat your children equally.
Yes. We actually have the gender conversation often in our house. And what we always say is, well, currently you say you are a boy and we call you a boy. If you change or if you decide that this is not what you're feeling, um, that's fine. And it actually made me, now in this whole conversation, made me realize, when we walk into a toy shop, what's the most frustrating thing when we walk into a toy shop? You've got a girl
The fact
section
that
and
they
you've got a
genders,
boy section.
they
And
gendered.
and okay, I'm going to edit out the crude comment anyway. But I always wonder, are they using their genitals to play with the toys? Why is it allocated anyway? So let me just take that. Yeah. So there's a boy section and there's a girl section, and it feels frustrating when my son wants to buy a toy vacuum cleaner, or wants to go into the so-called girl section, and the looks that people get. And I've actually had been me like turned around to shop assistant that asked me, shouldn't he be at the cars or whatever, and I pretended to be very shocked and looked at her and I said to her, oh my word, so you are one of those unfortunate women that only like cleans up after her husband the whole time. I'm so sorry
You
for
don't
you.
get to do other things. Yeah.
And she just looked at me, and turned around and walked away. And I'm like, I should stop being sarcastic with people. How to make friends and influence, what? How to make enemies and influence friends. And so, but it's that whole mindset of, when we raise our kids, even though we use the word boy or he or that, but we teach them and we raise them that gender is whatever.
Mm.
Then I
Mm.
suspect also that the amount of harm with gender identification issues that comes along, and the confusion and the hurt and the suicides will actually be less. And
Yeah.
that we're hopefully raising a generation of kids that will walk through the world, and if they see someone that has a beard but is wearing a dress, they'll like, love your dress, dude, or love your dress, hey, and carry on. Or where there's no there's in their minds, there's
Mm.
no gender stereotype of what this person needs to look like to fit into our own classification. And I'm trying very hard to teach my children this. And I must say, I felt like a bit of a pat on the back for myself. My husband is going, his company is really focusing on gender equality, and they're quite often doing these gender equality training seminars. And he came to me and he said to me, he always thought that he didn't have a bias until he was asked this question in the
Oh.
thing. And it's the classic one, you're going to immediately recognize it. So this man gets into a car accident and he goes to the
Mm.
hospital, and they call the doctor over, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, I cannot operate on this person. This is my family. Who is this person? How can that be? And his immediate thought was like, maybe his brother, and the answer was, it's his wife.
Wow.
And so
I also thought brother, son, uncle. I don't know why. I did not think why.
So
it's the same as when someone is driving behind you and you're like, oh, this person, why is he doing this? You always think the other driver is a man. Oh my God!
Especially if it's those buckies. Anyway.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It also shocked me. Like, what the hell? Why did I think a man?
Exactly. So, like challenging our own biases. And my husband had the conversation with our eldest, and he asked him the question. So this person went to hospital, and gave like the whole background, and our oldest looked at him and was like, because it's his wife. And then I'm like,
yay.
Okay, we're doing something right somewhere.
Yay. Because I think it's because now I would think he'd say it's my wife. I don't know. If they don't say wife, you just automatically think it's some man. Oh my gosh, this is interesting. I'm gonna ask people this.
So that those kind of thought experiments we started doing quite early on, asking them questions to check if our raised bias that we're busy breaking down actually is transferred, and if it is transferred, then we need to break it down now while we still can, that they don't have to struggle to break it down as adults. But yeah, so that was just an interesting thought experiment, like on the feminist conversation that we're having.
I love it.
Right. Well, I thank you so much for joining me with this conversation. I think we really need to do this more often. We have so many things to cover, because we went from feminism to GBV to gentle discipline, to the whole scope, and even to racism. So
very hard to separate them.
You can't actually. It's part of being human, and it's part of raising kids at this particular point in time in society, and how society is finally starting to move to a space where we can start dismantling these hurts and these pains and the obstacles, and please continue fighting. You are, like I said, you are an inspiration. Always when I look at something, I like quickly go and check what does Gaopalelwe know? What does she think about it? Okay, all right. So let me just quickly. Okay, this is where my bias lies. Okay, let me fix that. So I appreciate everything that you do. If you guys want to see more of how, check out her blog, the Mommy, Feminist Mommy. She's on Twitter. I'll let her drop all her socials for you now. And if you check down below, you'll get the socials of both my stuff, of C3 Parenting, and of Gao's stuff. Thank you for watching with us. Please let us know what you think down below in the comments. How's your journey going as a parent? We love you. We'll see you next time, and have a beautiful day. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Karien. I really also learned a lot from this conversation, because we never stop learning. People can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just type @Feminist Mommy. You'll see me posting about puries, about parenting, and busting myths, yo.
Have a good one, guys. Cheers.